What if you were thrown out of the very business you built with your own two hands? Hello to all our incredible listeners. You wise, hard-working souls who know the value of sweat, loyalty, and legacy. Today's story will grip your heart. It's about Jack Harper, a small-town mechanic who trusted the wrong man, only to return 6 months later, disguised and determined to reclaim everything stolen from him. Betrayal runs deep, but what follows is a masterclass in grit, justice, and redemption. Stay with us, because this isn't just about fixing cars. It's about fixing what matters most. The smell of motor oil and burnt coffee still lingered in the air as Jack Harper sat in his recliner, doctor's note in hand, heart monitor still beeping faintly in the background. Just 3 days ago, he'd collapsed, in his own garage, right there between Bay 2 and the old vending machine that hadn't worked in years. At 62, he'd always believed he could outrun stress with hard work and early mornings, but the cardiologist had laid it out plainly. You keep going like this, you won't make it to your next oil change. Jack knew the truth. He had to step back. That morning he called Eddie Ramos into the office, the man who'd worked beside him for nearly 2 decades, the guy he'd given a raise to even during lean years. Jack trusted Eddie like family. So when he handed over the keys and said, "Keep the place running, don't change a thing," it wasn't just an ask. It was a legacy, passed down. Eddie nodded with wet eyes and said, "You have my word, Jack." The next 6 months passed like a slow drip of recovery and restlessness. Jack spent his mornings walking the trail behind his house, afternoons checking in with Shelby Cross, his former apprentice-turned-teacher, and evenings sitting on the porch, fighting the urge to drive by the shop. But something gnawed at him. The shop's Facebook page had gone quiet. His old customers stopped calling. Even Franklin Duvall, a retired professor and loyal client of 20 years, left a message saying, "You doing okay, Jack? I brought my truck in last week and, well, it just didn't feel right in there anymore." That was the crack in the dam. Jack got up before dawn the next morning. He shaved his beard into something unfamiliar, threw on a cap and faded work shirt from his days at Miller's Auto back in '88, and stared at his reflection. Rick Jordan, he told himself. That would be his name. That would be his mask. Jack didn't want to believe Eddie had let him down, but something about the silence, the changes, the gut feeling, that sixth sense that only comes from building something with your bare hands for 30 years, told him something had gone wrong. And if he didn't go now, whatever was left of Harper and Sons might be lost for good. Jack Harper pulled into the parking lot just after 8 a.m., the familiar crunch of gravel under his tires betraying a rhythm he hadn't heard in months. But everything else felt off. The old hand-painted Harper and Sons auto sign was gone, replaced with the sleek aluminum logo that read H&S Performance. His chest tightened. The flower bed his late wife had planted had been dug up and paved over. Inside, the once cozy waiting room, where neighbors had swapped fishing stories and kids played with toy trucks, was now a sterile cube of chrome chairs and mounted screens playing stock footage of sports cars. Not a single family photo remained. The woman behind the front counter looked barely old enough to drive and didn't recognize him. "I'm here about the mechanic job," Jack said, using the name he'd rehearsed. Rick Jordan. She tapped something on a tablet and called for the floor manager. That's when Troy Maddox strutted in, late 30s, all swagger and sarcasm, wrapped in cologne and designer boots. Jack had never met him before, but his gut said everything he needed to know. "You the applicant?" Troy asked, eyeing him up and down. "You're, what, 60? Jack smiled politely. 59, he lied. "Still got a few good years in these hands," Troy smirked. "We're looking for a different energy, you know? More performance-driven, fast-paced, lean team stuff. Maybe try Thompson's Garage, down on Route 6. They still do old school." Jack stood still. "I've worked on trucks longer than you've been shaving. You don't think I can handle it?" Troy leaned in, fake empathy oozing. "It's not about what you can handle. It's about what the brand can project." That word, brand, slapped harder than the dismissal. This wasn't just a denial, it was erasure. Jack had spent 3 decades building a place where people weren't customers, they were neighbors, where a handshake still meant something, and nobody was ever gouged on parts they didn't need. Now he stood inside the very walls he'd built with his own tools, being told he didn't belong. As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse through the shop bay. None of the old crew was there. Just unfamiliar faces, cold stares, and a workspace that looked more like a showroom than a garage. Back in his truck, Jack gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles pale. He didn't feel angry yet, not grief, just an eerie calm, and a single thought that echoed like thunder. They don't know who they just turned away. Jack didn't drive straight home. He needed answers. He needed someone who would tell him the truth. No boardroom polish, no polite lies. He turned off the main road and made his way to the local high school's auto tech building, a place he'd helped fund 5 years ago. That's where he found Shelby Cross, elbow deep in a busted carburetor, with 2 teens hanging on her every word. Shelby had once been his apprentice, a dropout with grease-stained fingernails and a chip on her shoulder the size of a drive shaft. Jack had taken her in when no one else would, taught her the trade, and watched her turn her life around. When she saw him standing in the doorway, she wiped her hands and smiled. But it faded the moment she took a second look. "Jack?" she whispered. He pulled off his cap. "It's me." She sent the students off with instructions and closed the bay door behind them. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "The second they changed the name, I knew." Jack nodded slowly. "I just got thrown out of my own shop, Shelby. Told I didn't fit the brand image." Her jaw tightened. "That tracks. Troy's been running things since about a month after you left." Eddie handed him the keys like it was nothing. Jack's stomach turned. "I trusted Eddie with everything. What the hell happened?" Shelby walked to her desk and pulled out a thick folder. "I've been keeping tabs. I hoped you'd come back. You remember Hank Nguyen?" Jack's brow furrowed. "Of course. Best transmission guy I ever had." Shelby nodded. "He got fired 3 months ago, accused of being insubordinate after questioning why they switched to knock-off brake pads. Said it was a cost-saving pivot." Jack flipped through the paperwork. Complaints from customers about overcharging, warranty refusals. Reggie left after they refused to let him give a military discount to a Vietnam vet. Shelby added. Said it was no longer in alignment with the new image. That broke him. He'd worked there since '99. Jack closed the folder and stared at the floor. "I asked Eddie for one thing. Just one. Keep it honest." Shelby put a hand on his shoulder. "He didn't keep anything, Jack. And if I were you, I'd look into who owns that brand new service truck in the back lot. Rumor is Titan Auto Group's already preparing an offer, and Troy's the one greasing the wheels." Jack stood up slowly, the weight of betrayal heavier than any engine he'd ever lifted. "Then it's time we pop the hood on this mess and find out what else they've been hiding." Jack left the school with the folder Shelby had given him wedged tightly under his arm like it was a crime scene report, and, in a way, it was. But suspicion wasn't enough. If he wanted to expose what had happened to Harper and Sons, he needed hard proof. That's why the next morning he paid a visit to Vanessa Hart, his longtime attorney and one of the few people who had been around since he opened the shop back in '93. Vanessa, sharp-eyed and silver-haired, listened carefully as Jack recounted the strange changes, the firings, and the betrayal by Eddie and Troy. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, drummed her fingers once, and said, "We'll need to follow the money." With Vanessa's legal authority and Jack's still active ownership credentials, they reached out to Miles Carter, the shop's former bookkeeper turned freelance cybersecurity consultant. Miles was a quiet guy, introverted, brilliant, and still loyal to Jack after all these years. Within hours, he was digging into the garage's financial records and back-end systems through encrypted remote access. What they found was worse than anything Jack had imagined. There were ghost invoices, fabricated parts orders billed at premium prices but never delivered, payment transfers to companies with no history or physical address, and most telling of all, regular, recurring, consulting fees paid to an LLC tied to Titan Auto Group, the very corporation Shelby had mentioned. Those payments began just 3 weeks after Jack's heart attack. "It's like they were waiting for you to step away," Miles muttered, "or hoping you wouldn't come back." More damning still was the document they found buried in a folder labeled Operations Continuity, a temporary transfer of decision-making authority signed by Eddie Ramos, citing medical incapacity and authorizing changes to vendor contracts, payroll policies, and even branding. The document used Jack's digital signature, but he had never seen it before. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "Forgery," she said flatly. "Felony-level fraud." Jack stared at the screen, numb. He wasn't just being pushed out. He was being erased. His shop, his reputation, was being used as a front for a corporate takeover, dressed in local clothing, all while Troy and Eddie cashed in, fired his people, and gutted the business he'd spent 3 decades building. Jack stood slowly. "If this is what they've done behind my back," he said, voice low and steady, "then it's time I look them in the eye." Vanessa nodded. "Let's set the trap." The next 48 hours became a whirlwind of planning, coordination, and quiet fury. Jack, Vanessa, Shelby, and Miles knew they couldn't just confront Eddie and Troy. They had to catch them in the act, with undeniable evidence that would hold up in court and in public opinion. "We're not just reclaiming the shop," Vanessa said. "We're burning their escape route behind them." The plan? Jack would return as Rick Jordan again, but this time not as a job seeker. He'd pose as a wealthy investor from Texas looking to expand a network of automotive repair franchises. Vanessa's contacts created a shell company complete with a business website, fake LinkedIn profile, and a digital business card with Jack's alias. They even added a fake press release to give Jordan Auto Ventures an air of legitimacy. Shelby, still connected to the staff through the tech school, contacted Troy and set up a lunch meeting at the garage. "I've got a friend who's investing in family-run shops with proven profits," she said. "He wants to meet the guy making Harper and Sons so successful." Troy, full of ego and ambition, jumped at the bait. "Bring him in Friday," he texted back. "Let's talk numbers." Miles got to work next, retrofitting small recording devices into Jack's portfolio binder, a lapel pin, and even his digital watch. Meanwhile, Vanessa acquired a temporary surveillance warrant to allow video recording in Jack's own office, now occupied by Troy, and made arrangements with Detective Howard, a local officer in the Financial Crimes Unit who had long been suspicious of Titan Auto Group's operations. By Thursday night, everything was in place. Vanessa reviewed the checklist. Cameras installed in the manager's office and meeting room, recorders synced, a signed court order ready in her briefcase. Shelby and 2 other former employees would be nearby, each wearing disguised body cams. Even Miles would be on standby, monitoring the feeds remotely and logging time-stamped footage. But Jack, pacing in Vanessa's office in a pressed button-down shirt and polished boots, felt a strange twist in his gut. "What if they don't take the bait?" he asked quietly. Vanessa met his eyes. "Jack, men like Troy don't pass up a chance to brag. He'll hang himself with his own words." Shelby grinned. "He thinks you're some Texas investor. He's going to sell you your own damn shop." Jack chuckled, though the fire in his eyes didn't waver. "Then let's give him the deal of a lifetime, and once he bites—" "We tighten the chain," Vanessa finished. Friday came, dressed in overcast skies, and a chill that matched Jack's mood. He stepped out of the rental SUV looking every bit the wealthy investor. Dark jeans, crisp white shirt, brown leather jacket, and mirrored sunglasses. The name tag on his portfolio read Rick Jordan, and tucked inside were his concealed recording devices, all live. Inside the garage, Shelby greeted him with a warm but professional nod. "Mr. Maddox is expecting you," she said, loud enough for the nearby receptionist to hear. Jack gave her a wink as she led him past the front counter, down the hall, and into what had once been his office. Now it smelled like expensive cologne and sported a Titan Auto calendar on the wall. The hand-carved wooden desk he built with his son years ago had been replaced by glass and steel. Troy Maddox strolled in moments later, a toothy grin already in place. "Mr. Jordan, welcome. You picked a great time. Business is booming," he said, sliding into the seat across from Jack. "I heard you're looking to invest in high-performing locals. Well, we've turned this old mom and pop into a money machine. Jack nodded, his voice smooth. And how'd you manage that? Troy leaned back, crossed his legs confidently. First thing I did? Cut the fat. Fired half the old staff. Too slow, too sentimental. Then we stopped wasting time on charity cases. No more military discounts, no more free oil changes for the Little League coach. Jack's jaw clenched under the calm facade. You're talking about community outreach, he asked. Yeah, well, that doesn't pay the bills, Troy scoffed. Neither did the guy who refused to use our new discount brake suppliers. What's the difference? They stop the car, don't they? Just then Eddie Ramos entered the room, looking older than Jack remembered, but just as comfortable in the lie. Mr. Jordan, he said, shaking Jack's hand. Thanks for your interest. Titan's looking to absorb this location soon, but we're open to better offers. Jack feigned curiosity. And the owner? He's on board with this plan? Eddie smirked. Jack? He's not coming back. Doctor's orders. It's better this way, for him and for us. Troy chuckled. Guy built a good shop, but he was stuck in 1998. Now it's about margins. Jack held their gaze behind his sunglasses, heart pounding in rage. Every word was being captured, every arrogant confession preserved. They were so sure he was just another suit, so sure Jack Harper was gone for good. They had no idea he'd been listening the whole time. Jack let the silence stretch just long enough for Troy and Eddie to lean back in their chairs, basking in their delusions. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, he reached up and pulled the sunglasses from his face. Next came the hat. Then the carefully applied graying beard peeled off in one clean sweep. As the fake facial hair dropped onto the desk between them, Troy's smirk evaporated like gasoline on hot pavement. Eddie's eyes widened and his mouth went slack. Jack, he whispered, voice cracking. Jack leaned forward, locking eyes with the man he once called a brother. That's right. Jack Harper, the guy you just bragged about betraying. Or beat. No one moved. Then Troy laughed. A dry, desperate chuckle. Well, this is awkward, he muttered, trying to recover. You have to understand, Jack, we were just... Jack cut him off. Don't. I gave you both everything. My trust, my business, my legacy. And you sold it off like it was scrap metal. He turned to Eddie. You signed a fake power of attorney. You fired people who were like family. You stole from me, Eddie. Eddie swallowed hard but said nothing. Guilt radiated from his every pore. The office door opened quietly behind them. Vanessa stepped in, flanked by Detective Howard and a deputy in uniform. Gentlemen, the detective said, unfolding a sheet of paper, you are under investigation for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit corporate theft. Jack stood, his hands steady now. You're done here, both of you. Eddie sputtered, Jack, wait. But Vanessa raised her hand. You'll have your chance in court. As the officers stepped forward to escort them out, the rest of the staff began to gather outside the glass office walls. Some stared in disbelief. Others began murmuring as they recognized Jack. From the far end of the bay, Hank Wynn stepped forward, arms folded, jaw tight. Jack caught his eye and gave him a subtle nod. Eddie was led out in silence. Troy tried to bolt, but was blocked, handcuffed, and read his rights. Jack exhaled slowly, the weight of 6 months of betrayal finally lifting off his chest. Let's get my shop back, he said to Vanessa, and remind this town what real work looks like. The next morning, the doors to Harper & Sons Auto reopened, not to customers, but to family. Jack stood beneath the hand-painted sign that had been pulled from storage and rehung overnight, the same one his wife had helped stencil back in '95. It was chipped, a little faded, but it belonged. Behind them, Shelby, Hank, Miles, and a few of the old crew filtered in, their boots echoing on the garage floor. There was no yelling, no celebration, just the quiet, purposeful hum of people returning to the place they called home. The walls were stripped of the cold corporate posters and repapered with Polaroids, racing flags, and a familiar bulletin board where community event flyers were already being pinned again. On one end of the shop, Hank rehung the American flag that had gone missing under Troy's reign. Nearby, Shelby unpacked the battered coffee maker and set out the chipped mugs Jack had refused to throw away for sentimental reasons. Reggie, the former cook-turned-processor, dropped off a tray of homemade biscuits and a welcome back boss note. Outside, word had already spread like wildfire. A crowd of familiar faces lined up near the entrance, longtime customers, veterans, single moms, and retirees, most with a story about how Jack's shop had helped them when money was tight or cars broke down before a job interview. One man, tears in his eyes, shook Jack's hand and whispered, "Thanks for not letting them kill this place." Jack nodded, humbled. By noon, the shop was buzzing, not just with work, but with belonging. The phones rang with appointments, but more than a few callers just wanted to say welcome back. Jack walked through the bays, observing, sometimes pitching in with a wrench, other times just soaking it all in. Shelby had organized a weekend youth class to teach kids basic car care. Miles set up a secure POS system and put safeguards in place to ensure no one could hijack the books again. Jack didn't need to micromanage. These people knew what they were doing. They always had. Later that day, Jack stood in the break room holding a dusty photo of his wife beside the original shop's grand opening. He carefully pinned it to the board and whispered, "We're still here." Then he turned to his team, coffee mug in hand. "We lost time, we lost trust, but we didn't lose. Now let's fix more than cars. Let's fix what matters." And with that, Harper & Sons was back, not just as a business, but as a beating heart of the community. The story of Harper & Sons Auto is a powerful reminder that a business is more than just bolts and balance sheets. It's about people, purpose, and principles. Jack Harper learned the hard way that trust, once broken, can shake the very foundation of everything you've built. Yet, through betrayal and deception, he also discovered the resilience of honest work and loyal relationships. When flashy upgrades and profit-driven shortcuts threatened to erase decades of integrity, it was the quiet loyalty of former employees, the memories of community service, and the values etched into every grease-stained floor tile that brought the garage back to life. The greatest lesson? Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you protect, nurture, and stand up for when it's under threat. In an age where bigger often means colder, and efficiency replaces connection, Jack proved that authenticity still matters. And for anyone who's ever built something with their bare hands, the story is a call to never let go of what made it matter in the first place. Because no matter how modern the world becomes, a shop held together by heart will always outlast one built on greed.